Some high-performing women in the news. We're going to talk about that tonight.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Now, we had some interesting conversations on the radio this week about Nikki Haley, our ambassador to the United Nations, the Southwest pilot who never got a chance to be in combat, even though she was certainly trained up for it. But certainly she showed her mettle without a doubt, and an incredible calm flying that Southwest plane to safety in Philadelphia this week. And I just thought it might be interesting to talk about these things because the movements get all sorts of attention. But real-life situations, I think, might even be more telling and more profound than the movements, like #MeToo. I think we just need to spend a little bit more time focusing on that stuff. So my sociologist from Brown University, Hilary Friedman, is here. She is, and frankly, when Professor Friedman shows up, I don't really know where the program is going to go. This program could end up in any particular place, which is the fun of it, especially on a Friday evening. You know that we record our Friday programs on Thursday, so if all heck breaks loose, we fire missiles somewhere, or something happens in the White House, not that that's occurring on a 24-hour news cycle. We'll catch up to that on Monday. So here's a headline from the political conversation. Actually, here's a short package from CBS, I should say, on the little flap that happened with the UN ambassador.
As for Russia, the president remains undecided about new sanctions to punish Moscow for aiding Syria's chemical weapons program. On Sunday, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said new sanctions were hours away.
You will see that Russian sanctions will be coming down.
But the president delayed that move. Yesterday, Chief White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow said Haley got out ahead of the curve.
There might have been some momentary confusion about that.
Not according to the ambassador. I don't get confused. Thank you very much. And not soon thereafter, Mr. Kudlow decided to apologize, although the apology was really about misinformation, not necessarily about setting the UN ambassador on a different, I don't know, level, which frankly I thought it was. Out to our guest, and the question is, was this a slight mishap or evidence of male chauvinist pigdom?
Well, it can be both at the same time.
Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Nice
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
Yes.
So we have so many cases in this particular presidential administration where someone may make some comments that produces, and some flap, and we have lots of evidence that people are not getting along in the ways that might have been expected in previous White Houses. And so on the one hand, it's just not entirely surprising that there are mixed messages being sent out there, and that the new kid on the block has come in and sort of put his foot in it a little bit. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine that someone would say exactly what they've said if it was a male UN ambassador. So they probably wouldn't have said, she got a little bit confused, right? It would have been said in a different way, but that has that sort of old notion that you're going to pat someone on the head and be like, you got confused. Like, yeah, it's okay. We'll step in and tell the real story.
I wish I could have a fight with you. I completely agree with you, and I said on the radio this week that is what it needs to be identified as. It's male chauvinism. There's no question about it. It's old boy network behavior, and I'm glad that she just handled it in the most efficient, fashion possible. Bang! I don't get confused. Sometimes less is more, and the less you say, the more impact it has. I mean, clearly, Nikki Haley, who had quite a successful run as the governor of South Carolina, and who really has been doing the president's bidding in keeping a really strong arm on Russia, and still finding a way to navigate and not get jammed up with the White House at the same time, which is not an easy task, given that the White House and the president are moving all the time on any particular issue. What she has been able to do, I think, so far is extraordinary. And she's no dummy, but she could have acquiesced to it. Or she could have stood on her head and made a big deal about it. Instead, she just went right for the jugular. I don't get confused. There's no way she went into the Sunday morning programs last week without a significant national security briefing that said that the sanctions were being stepped up. And I just think that it would be interesting to talk to you about this in terms of how this is as much a learning lesson for America that America will probably ignore. The hashtag #MeToos and the blah, 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 all of which have their certain level of credibility and weight, are heavy lifting. This is an easy study. I don't think it's going to get a lot of attention, but I think it should. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Me Too is essentially about sexual harassment. Right. And so I guess you could say in academia, we might say these are the microaggressions that occur on an everyday level, but you could also just say...
Microaggression, meaning?
Like, these are the little things that are aggressive in some minor way every day.
Meaning the confusion thing?
Right, so that like women are attacked in these like little ways every day, and so you might not be harassed in like a sense of a legal sense or anything like that, but that this is like a form of a harassment that we might not call it harassment, right? It's like no one's talking about how she looked.
Right. So I think
so it's like a more under the surface.
Yeah, right.
And if you don't call it out, then those things build up, right? So you could say, you know, sexual harassment in the workplace or how women are talked about in the media is the culmination of all of these little instances where we treat women in this particular way, even with language, and that the language matters.
Yeah, I'm not, good points. I'm not trying to suggest that the Me Too movement correlates to this particular matter. Right. It's just that it seems like, to make the point, it seems to me that we should pay attention to the point that's been made by Nikki Haley by saying, I don't get confused. Parentheses, I'm as competent or more competent than those knuckleheads in the White House. I'm holding this thing together. I got the finger in the dikes. I'm moving this thing forward, and I don't need some, you know, old has-been, you know, from CNBC walking in here and suggesting that I may have been, or that it was confusing. Confusion is a power word. Confusion is not necessarily able to discern or understand what went on there, or not able to actually massage it or handle it, or the execution of that which she was explained is a little bit off-putting. So all I'm suggesting is that these, what did you call them, micro what?
Aggressions.
I think microaggressions sometimes are the things that should be most discussed, rather than getting all. We got to elect the president of a movement, and we've got to have, we have to have Facebook and social media surges in a particular way, and the pendulum goes bang, and the point's over. This ought to be an example for every young lady who is seeking professional or leadership, occupational role or goal in her life, to look at this and say, that's what you don't want to put up with, and that's how you take care of it.
Yeah, and I actually particularly appreciate that in her response, she wasn't defensive. She was firm. She didn't try to say, no, we had these conversations, or you weren't in that meeting, or I was in this meeting. There was no, explanation. There was no, I was not confused, I don't get confused, and this is the reason why. It was just stood on its own, and I think that said more than anything else. And if anything, the new kid on the block, what's his last name, Kudlow?
Yeah, Larry Kudlow.
He had to walk it back himself, and I think that put him in the position.
But he didn't walk it back in the way that I think would have been intellectually honest. You walk it back in a way that says, hey, you know what? I got to check myself. Instead, he walked it back in terms of what he was sorry about was that she may have had information that was a little bit too aggressive in terms of whether Russian sanctions were actually going to be in place. He didn't. Everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, I'm sure there are plenty of people in the country like you and me are talking about this, but I just don't think the country has been served up enough high-profile conversation about exactly what happened here, which ought to be obvious to everyone and ought to be a learning lesson. Right.
Agreed.
I mean, I think you ought to take that clip in every sociology class you have where you talk about gender equity in terms of respect and blah, blah, and play that, say, here's the example, here's a deft way to handle it.
Agreed. We see this a lot in how women are treated in sports as well, and also in this, you know, this amazing pilot who landed this plane. You know, most of the conversation at first was, wow, he did such an amazing job. Because of course the assumption is.
We'll talk about her coming up. I just think, you know, as a father of a young professional woman and somebody who's grown up in that environment with 4 sisters who are young professionals, you hear some complaints that you kind of go, but that one I think was as plain as the nose on our faces, and I think it's something that ought to be discussed around the dining room table a bit. We'll come back, we'll talk about that pilot too, because her story is a unique one. Stay with us. So this flight that was taken down successfully in Philadelphia, the Southwest flight, is an interesting story. They used the headline from yesterday. There was a firefighter who did heroic work in trying to save the single victim who lost her life, and that's a horror show. And to his credit, he didn't talk much about it. Here's a package from CBS from this week that ends with the conversation about the pilot. That's pretty interesting.
Federal investigators are analyzing how one of the 24 metal fan blades snapped mid-flight on this Boeing 737 engine.
How concerned are you about the safety of 737s in general?
Well, we're very concerned about this particular event. Why did this happen? As far as trying to extrapolate that out to the entire fleet of 737s, I think that's unwarranted at this point.
Passenger Jennifer Reardon was sitting next to the window when it was hit by shrapnel from the engine. She was wearing her seatbelt, according to the NTSB, but was nearly sucked out of the plane. Medical examiners say she was killed by blunt impact trauma to her head, neck, and torso. Texas firefighter Andrew Needham was among the passengers who pulled Reardon back inside the plane.
I felt the calling to get up and do something, stand up and act. My heart goes out to Jennifer and her family. I can't imagine what they're going through.
The New Mexico mother of 2 was a vice president at Wells Fargo. Her sister-in-law says Jennifer lived a remarkable life.
She was just a beautiful person from the inside out.
Captain Tammie Jo Shults was in command of this Southwest 737 when the engine blew and the plane pitched 41 degrees to the left.
I believe Captain's side is where we had the damage, and that's the engine that went out.
Shults calmly spoke to air traffic control as she and her co-pilot Darren Ellisor steadied the 737 and began a rapid emergency descent. The pilots returned home last night and said, "We all feel we were simply doing our jobs. Our hearts are heavy." At least one member of Congress is now calling for hearings on aviation safety.
You know, right place, right time, wrong place, right time in life, fate, all of that. But the headline that I think really is the conversation here is this, the nerves of steel. With this pilot who, as we learn now, is, you know, class of 79 out of high school, which would be my class. So she's my age. She had challenges getting to her professional goal of being a fighter pilot who could see combat through the Air Force. The Air Force actually kind of stopped her. The Navy actually took her on, and she excelled, but she never got into combat. Now here she is now in retirement, as many of these outstanding pilots are, you know, running commercial flights, calm, cool as a cucumber. I mean, if you listen to the long audio of her managing this situation, when she says, you know, something to the effect of, yeah, I think we have a hole in the plane, and we, you know, and somebody went out, and the air traffic controller, who also very calm, says, come again? Somebody went out? Okay, but just stay cool. You know, I'm going to slow the plane down, da-da-da. By the way, she landed at an accelerated speed. She obviously was highly skilled. But I was just reflecting on the idea that probably the Air Force or the Navy missed an opportunity all these years. And thank goodness things have changed. Your reflection?
Yeah, there are 2 things that stand out to me from some of the stories I've read. One is, during her senior year of high school, apparently she went to one of these recruiting events and she sat in the front row, and I can't remember which branch of the military it was who said this, but essentially said, if you get confused or you don't understand, let me know. Didn't say that to anybody else, didn't say that to any of the male students. So, you know, to tie that into what we're still talking about with Nikki Haley, Ambassador Haley, like, that's quite interesting. The second thing is she retired, I read, 2 days before the decision came out that women were going to be able to fly in combat. So again, it's a question of timing, and it's interesting to think about, but if that had happened, maybe she wouldn't have been able to save 148 people. earlier this week. It's an extraordinary story, and you know, we celebrate, I think about the Tom Cruise movie, Top Gun, and we think about all the fighter pilots, and it's so macho, but you know, this is a new version of Top Gun, really.
But it is a marker on how far we've come, thankfully, right?
Yes, I mean, but I have to point out, you know, there were lots of headlines, oh, wow, that pilot, he landed the plane so well, because people just assume that it's a male, because that's fair, because I think it's something like 7% of commercial
you're talking about
pilots.
for this particular story.
Yeah, commercial pilots are male. So, yes, we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go, right?
Yeah, I don't know that there. I didn't. Did you see headlines that actually reflected a male pilot?
People on Twitter were commenting.
Well, that's social media.
Okay.
That's a whole nother world.
Still.
But I guess what you're saying is that without reading specifically who the pilot was, you would make an assumption that it was a male pilot.
And that's not unfair, again,
No.
because percentage-wise, that is what one would expect.
Although, if you're being intellectually honest, you probably find out, when you find out that he is a she, you probably go, huh, which is what I did. I don't know, maybe there'll be a time when you don't even go, huh. But at least we're going, huh, and we're reflecting on the fact that, you know, she's as qualified. In fact, her husband's also a pilot, and he says she's the best pilot he knows. It's a great story. Could have been a whole lot worse. When we come back, we'll talk about our guest role with a political organization of fame. Stay with us. Of course, the funeral for Barbara Bush is tomorrow. She is an extraordinary woman. We got into a real conversation and a half on the radio a couple of days ago about her. Her model, for lack of a better term, is kind of an old-fashioned model in terms of how she led her life, right? Complete devotion to her husband. Her husband was running the show. She took care of the kids. But she's no wallflower, and when she spoke all during her tenure in public life, she was, you know, she stopped you. In fact, I think she may have been more provocative than her husband in terms of everyday speaking, because you always wondered, it's okay to have that model still, isn't it?
Well, if the whole point of the feminist movement is that we should have a choice, right? So that's an equally valid choice to a woman who doesn't want to have a family at all, or decides to pursue a professional career and balance a family. Like, the whole point is that we have a choice and that we shouldn't prioritize one of those over another. Now, you can easily argue that in her day, I mean, she had been admitted to Smith, left when she was 20 to get married, perhaps felt like there weren't as many opportunities open to her at that time, right? She couldn't fly in combat. Her husband's a noted, you know, a pilot in wartime. And so you can think about how we would compare that situation today. But certainly, like, it's an extreme amount of work to raise children and to manage a family. And they had 6 children, and that's a lot of work. And so I don't think we should say flying a plane is more important than that, but just recognize that we want the opportunity to make that choice.
And she did actually make a quip in one of her speeches. It might have been at Wellesley, that's kind of going around, where she talked about, you know, a first husband.
Yes.
And I don't have the exact phrase, but you know, she made note, you know, that she expected this tide to turn at some juncture. Will it or won't it? I don't know. If you think about prospects out there, old Nikki Haley's probably sitting there thinking, you know what, one more of these stunts and I'm going my own way.
Well, she did have a presidential run previously, or seriously consider one.
She considered it.
Considered it, and was considered a vice presidential
So speaking of
candidate.
politics, you are now the new president of the Rhode Island National Association of Women, or for women.
The Rhode Island chapter of the National Organization for Women.
For women. Political, but not partisan. What?
Well, there are a variety of issues that we advocate for. Those center on issues about reproductive freedom, economic equity, so like equal pay and all those sorts of things. Those are not issues that are owned by a particular party per se, right? Like, anyone can apply for our endorsement. It's, do you agree with these values? Now, it is just a fact that these days in our two-party system, there is one party that tends to overwhelmingly be associated with those types of issues. But in the past, the Rhode Island Now PAC has endorsed Republican candidates. Again, not in the recent past so much, but it has happened. And
how many members?
We have about 530 paying members of the Rhode Island chapter.
Do members identify in terms of party affiliation?
They're not asked to do that. I see different members around the state at different events. Many of them happen to be Democratic events, but it's not even something that's asked when you sign up to be a member.
So what are the priorities this year?
So our legislative priorities have been two that are, have been true for years, which are reproductive freedom, as I mentioned. So not just abortion, but access to contraception as well. Equal pay is very big, and that's been a priority of the Senate president. That bill has already passed the Senate. So
what specifically does that do?
So the equal pay bill that is out right now obviously does all the things that you would expect it to do at the beginning, but the important thing is that it's trying to put some teeth into it. So if someone violates knowingly or knowingly discriminates against an employee because they're women or any other protected class, that there is actually going to be penalties, there are legal ramifications that come into play. So it's trying to give that more teeth. Also prohibits employers to ask applicants what their prior salary history is, because that puts women at a particular disadvantage, for example. So laying out specific changes to make. And then the third thing that we've been prioritizing this year.
An employer can't ask a prospective employee what kind of money they've made?
In the past, correct.
That's a gender bias?
Well, because traditionally, this is true for everybody, right? Like this would be law for everybody, but traditionally for women, if you've left the workforce, to take some time off to raise a family, or if you've worked part-time to raise a family, your annual income is going to be much less than if you were working full-time or had never left.
Well, that's self-explanatory.
Right, but it's a way to actually, in practice, we know this, pay women less for equal work.
That's another show.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then I'll tell you about the third thing that we've made a priority this year.
In a minute.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
In a minute.
Sorry.
You have the floor, Madam President.
We've been very focused on affordable childcare and the importance of, making childcare affordable across the state, but also providing childcare opportunities so that more women are able to speak out about the issues that matter to them, which may not be these three issues, but we've done 3 times now at the State House this legislative session that we've offered free childcare in the State House library so that people can come, anyone can come and drop their children off and then go to hearings or go to lobby either in the House or Senate to talk to their representatives. And this has been really successful that we've been able to do this. We've gotten a lot of support from Secretary of State and the governor's office. And by the way, I have to say, we didn't get to this today, but the ways in which our governor, one of only 2 female Democratic governors in the nation, is sometimes talked about. We could talk about some Nikki Haley moments there too. So that's another show too.
She'll be back soon. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We'll be here for a final word when we come back. Stay with us. I told you Hillary always goes somewhere. Now I want to do another show, because I'll tell you, there's a lot of Raimondo code out there. She'll be back soon, I can promise you. Another guy that's got me puzzled, Giovanni Feroci. He's running for governor, and you better understand what blockchain is to get his platform. You got the weekend to study. See you Monday. Bye.